In today's interview, our medium will talk to Steve Jobs' spirit using such method as channeling that allows us to talk to his soul. We'll find out things that have been untold during his incarnation here on Earth. In our spiritual session, we'll talk about what was his mission, where all his ideas and concepts came from, how good or bad technologies may be for the humanity, and do we have a choice? Why did he use psychedelics when he was young? How did his trip to India change his life? And why he didn't allow gadgets for his children? If you are new to our YouTube community and never heard of channeling and wonder how do we talk to the spirit, please see our explanation video on the link below. If you would like to receive more our videos, please subscribe and do not forget to push the bell button to receive our videos first. Hello, Steven. I've heard that you've been warned about our visit. Yes, they said I could give some information because we still need to get permission about it to some extent. And how do you get permission? From whom? It comes to us. You mean they tell you if you can share information or not? Yes, they tell what's your purpose and what's your intention. Do you have often visits like ours? They like to bother. They think they will be like finding a treasure. There will be some storehouse of information that they will find a golden ticket for a living. They're looking for a great benefit in the material life. They think I have ideas on how to create a new product. They want to make an innovative product that can become a better version for what is now. I don't share such things because when I was in that dimension, I could take that kind of information, but now I can't. I don't need it too much. Yeah, for sure. So the level of people who come is not very high. You use it as a tool, not that even to take the glory and my knowledge. They just don't go through the way to get the knowledge. Of course, I don't give them anything. I only give them bits and pieces to give them the feeling that they have learned something from me. Yes, I understand. But our intentions are a bit Yeah, I know what you came for. Okay, you won't say that again. So what's the level of your soul now? 7. Before you came down to Earth as Steve Jobs, did you have many reincarnations on the planet Earth? Yes, of course. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to stand this. But truly, I wasn't fully able. It happens like someone loses his mind, or someone starts to go so deep that they lose touch with reality. I was losing it too, because I lived in my own big illusion. Well, I wouldn't call it quite an illusion, but it replaced the outer world for me so much that it reflected everything in my life and people around me. I think it because my mind was too fast. Because my mind was too fast, like a fast processor. You see, it was very quick-witted, and it was very strange to me that other people didn't match my level. And I just sometimes lost my sensitivity or empathy for people. That's why I demanded the same level as me, and right now we all realize that it's unrealistic. So people had to suffer around me, but I did it to some extent not so consciously. I lived so strongly in my own reality, and the knowledge that was in me, it was like flashing in my mind, and it was like a thunder process in my head. So I rushed it to bring it to life. You understand that when you know 100% that will work, when you understand that this is the right solution, and you hear these all arguments around you, when people don't believe you,
They don't listen to you, and sometimes they consider to some extent strange, and it so infuriated me. I was really surprised by it. It's not stupidity, but such a narrow thinking about everything new. Well, I knew it would work. Everything new caused such fear and one sided perception in people that I just exploded. You see, when it came to me, I needed to realize it as soon as possible so as not to lose this feeling. So I was usually in a hurry because the feeling of inspiration happened to slip away. And then you vaguely begin to realize this, and it makes you lose your faith and you start being crushed. But I tried not to reach this point, so I lived in that kind of world and didn't let anyone enter in it, that no one could knock me down.
Is this why so many people have considered you to be so bad tempered? It was just because people's frequency was lower and they couldn't understand the difference?
Yes, this is how to make it work. Relatively speaking, if you put modern computer and the old one next to each other, you can't ask them to do the same thing. Well, and you can get angry at the old one for the fact that he's slow, but I couldn't realize it because I was so immersed in my mind that I just used people's brains as tools to implement my ideas. I knew what to do, I knew what to give to someone so they could implement it and force them to do it in a super aggressive and difficult conditions just to activate them. I was absolutely sure that in a state of stress and tight deadlines and my strong faith, I was so strongly conveyed such a strong intention and total submission that they couldn't even have a doubt about my idea and they couldn't even think about that it was unreal. I heard to turn them on. I thought I was turning them on, and I thought I was making their brains work at the full power that they could use. But they are used to being in some kind of passive mode. I know though. In general, I felt the makings of people, and I felt what was in them. So I used people as my tools. You know, it's like an orchestra. In order to play a melody, you have to turn on the violin, and then at some moment, let's say the piano, I just knew what strings to pull, but I pulled them sometimes so hard that they even a little bit,
You mean to say burned out?
well, imagine how hard it is. It is like some smart guy starts thinking that everyone hasn't the same abilities and start to demand the same from everyone. Then he realized that it's not quite true and that others have a different level. Sometimes I demanded so much, but I was in such, as you call it, flow mode. When the knowledge came to me, it was so bright and so big that I wanted to bring it to life as fast as I could. As I realized it's gonna be a breakthrough for people, and I thought that such idea couldn't be missed. That's why I pushed so hard and rushed all the time.
And how often you were wrong in your confidence?
When I began to create something from my own mind and didn't realize that some true knowledge came to me from above. So I played this game a little bit, and that it seems like all great ideas were mine, and that my genius was from myself and my personality. Partly, yes, but after big success with some ideas, I started to create new ones on my own, but it didn't always work. But during this series of experiments, I tried different things. If I have only succeeded and didn't make any mistakes, then I wouldn't have grown up in this. and didn't pass some lessons that I had to pass in my life. But tell me, when you had that flow state where you got all these ideas and you rushed to bring it to life as soon as possible, did you understand during these moments that this was not exactly your ideas and you got it from above? Or you thought that it all belonged to you? Yeah, I'm telling you, I was so much in the paradigm somehow that I didn't always see the difference. I understood the condition. When I have something condescending but so overplayed that sometimes creates something on my own. Well, it's like out of my head. I believe that I need to do such a project now, and it seemed to me that that would be a breakthrough. But it came more from my head, and I thought that I myself would be able to develop this and do it successfully. But some of my ideas didn't work. Yeah, I had states when I realized that there was some kind of it's strange to explain. Well, not a magical state, but a state when you just have a burst of inspiration. Like a hail of thoughts and emotions, states, pictures, ideas. And it's not just like a flash, but it's like a long stretch of ideas, so intense. It was so vivid in my head. And during these states, I realized how unique these ideas were and how disruptive they would be. So I paid no attention to my everyday life. They just didn't interest me. I was just not up to it. Just imagine an artist in the state of inspiration. You don't notice anything around you. No people, no time, no hunger, no your own physical appearance. You don't really care what you look like. You don't really care what you wear. And you love so much what you do. And you are in such oblivion that you lose contact with reality. That your reality starts inside your head, not outside. And that is why you want some things never distract you at all. That is the reason for my asceticism in life. I didn't need much. I didn't need much. It really distracted me. I liked everything simple because it didn't take my attention and it means my energy because I wanted all the attention to be directed to my ideas and their implementation. I tried to live only in this paradigm, but at some moments I was so driven and fanatical that I burned out. I didn't know how to have a mental rest. I didn't know how to cool my brain and slow it down. You probably understand the state of workaholism when you want to make everything so much and you get a lot of energy and want to do it as fast as you can, but your body exists in the material world and it requires some certain treatment and attention and rest, and it happens that it breaks because of the lack of balance. But I think it's a part of my payback and I don't regret it.
Question to the audience. Have you experienced this state of flow? Please share it with us in the comments below, so we could better understand what aspects you are interested more. That will help us to make our videos more helpful and interesting.
You started that it's hard to cope with that amount of information and intensity, but what's the real problem behind that? The problem with the body that it's not designed for this, or there's a limited capacity with personality that needs to be worked out with? When you reach a certain high level, everyone looks at you and it empowers you very much. I wouldn't say that it played strongly on my ego, but I understood who I was. I was aware of what I was doing, that I was creating a new page in people's lives. And I will not hide it, I liked it. But I liked the process of creating the products. I'm a very technical person in this regard. I like what I've seen, that I'm shaping a new world. I was getting people involved into this new reality that started just in my head. And then this reality started to be in other people's minds. I liked that I was influencing their lives through myself. You're really into it. It's hard to quit being in the state and go to some kind of retirement. I believe such things will only happen to such workaholics. But frankly, I could do that in a more soft way to myself. Is it really possible to manage such flow? I won't say it's easy. I don't even know how now. I just see my condition at that time, and I understand that most likely I still wouldn't change anything, even if I knew the end. It was so bright, so strong, that I wouldn't change it to more ordinary but longer life with less knowledge. I would still not dare to choose this path, so that's why I have no regrets now. Tell me, please, in this life you were considered to be the father of technology revolution, but tell me, please, your previous reincarnations were also similar to that? Yes, but not quite in such technical as you mean electronic way. I carried some ideas in terms of forming the development of humanity. These were the inventions of an industrial kind. Just for that moment, I didn't bring it fully to an ideal state. I was mistaken. There were a number of betrayals, and in general, well, I didn't quite cope with that track. And what happened next? You in several incarnations didn't cope with the past task. Okay, so you're moving into the world of souls. What's going on after? You meet a kind of board, or you're being given a similar task on a different scale at another time on Earth. How does that work? Can you tell us in more detail about this? Yes, and I had a request for the same. Just I in this life, I was ready to bear such a burden and such responsibility. But I understood that it was a very fine line that in whose interest I would play. And I did have to, well, not physical me, but my soul had to make not easy decisions at some stage, as far as I can be clean. And at that time, it was not always very clear for me in whose interests I play and how could that affect in the future technology of humanity. And the soul couldn't see it, or only a physical part didn't understand that? I understood that I had a lot of influence on the future development. I didn't fully realize what's next. No one can realize what's next. It's like you can give a person an apple and he can choke on it, but you gave him good intentions. And how he can use it is also his decision. So I was aware that I could have had a detrimental effect possible in the future, but in the moment I considered, well, I didn't even consider, I saw no other choice not to do it. I didn't have a thing that I probably won't do because it's too breakthrough stuff. I didn't have any thoughts like that. I knew that one way or another, I was going to do it anyway. But I understood that in the wrong hands, it could be like a monkey with a grenade. You understand what I mean? That there may be other consequences, but you can't forecast into the future. No one can do that. You're making the history in the moment, and I want to tell you, it's a very fascinating matter. When you get screwed very strongly and says that you're responsible, but people choose themselves. That is, you're kind of shifting responsibility from yourself to others. As they say, you choose yourself, and not choosing is also your choice.
To choke an apple sounds funny. And initially, such talk about technology in general, where did it appear? I mean, the scenario where the human progress is based on technological development. Is this a challenge or a task from whom?
Well, originally, I had to improve people's lives to ensure they had a quick communication with each other. It's like creating a network. You know that there are animals that communicate according using kind of networks with each other. That is why they react so quickly. That means it doesn't take months to spread the news, but it takes seconds. You saw a flock of fish that reacts immediately. So my goal was to make people react faster and increase the speed of connecting to each other. You may think it as a telepathy. You may think of it as telepathy, but in a different form. So my goal was to connect people to the network so they could react faster.
But from whom was this task? From light or from dark?
Initially, it was a general decision. It's one of the stages, and it's inevitable because growth is growth. I mean, the rise of civilization. This path wasn't created since the beginning, and since it went on such a development scenario, I just took these technologies and blended them into a beautiful shape that everyone liked. Because many technologies were not invented by me. With me, usability became more intuitive and easy. I just extracted people's desire for simplicity and intuitive things and shaped them into the shape you know now. I just gave already current technology a shape. Therefore, the path that went, it was just like combining into some one network. So I did it. But which way will this turn is the choice people have we're all talking about. Let's say you're sitting and looking at sunset, but someone is sitting looking at the screen. Someone is looking at living things and someone are not. That is why this is the choice everyone have. People were given a tool. They can already kill with a shovel, or maybe they can dig and plant a tree. It all differs how you use it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I understand. But let me ask the next question then. Being in the world of souls and having several incarnations about technological development, tell me please, is the technological development of humanity that is moving us away from the spiritual and from the natural, is this the most optimal scenario in the changing times for the Earth and humanity? What do you think?
Not everyone is needed.
Not all the technologies are needed?
Not all the people are needed.
What do you mean by that?
I just want to say that not all the mass of people are needed for spiritual uplift.
And from the soul's world perspective, how many people are needed for the spiritual rise and entering new era?
And for what? To guide others. There are souls who will continue to pass the path on the earth, but they already have their own soul format. And there are souls in which it is already time to move to a new level. This is more a story about those souls who need to go on a new, different, higher level. Because within the framework of Earth, souls will come. and it will be a bright period for them to get faster, to learn, and to grow. You understand that those souls have grown up to the point in this manifestation of civilization when they definitely should not go further because they have already reached their own level of growth. Of course, I'm not talking specifically about one reincarnation. Maybe it will be several more, and this is fairly a short period of time given in the time formats. That is why I don't say about thousands of years. We're talking within 100 or 200 years. Therefore, there's a dead end when these souls need to go faster and move to a new level. That's what I mean. Someone in this life, someone in the next life. And so it's more of a part of the story about them. Because on average, in any case, the vibrations will rise and people will be born in a new format. It's like indigo children. They are already adapted to the realities of new world and they intuitively feel what needs to be done and they are also free to choose whether they like to live in some virtual world or like to contemplate everything that is created here. Some will choose a different path, and this is also normal. They're not old enough yet. They just need to stay in it for now. They'll just have a longer way to go. That doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It's just that there's a school and there are different classes in it. But you said the Earth will move on. And what will happen to those people who won't be able to wake up while the Earth will be raising her vibrations? What will happen? It's just that they won't be able to appear here next time. They will appear in other places and dimensions. This is natural and there's nothing terrible about it, just a relocation. You see, there's a certain level like a sailing. The Earth has got its certain level of resources to be able to invite a certain number of souls and give the opportunity for rebirthing on Earth and pass your way. It's like going to school, to a certain school. Let's call it Harvard for you. But not quite, of course. Well, okay, but Harvard can't accept more than a certain number of students. Therefore, some students are expelled. Or if they lower their vibration and they go to another school and study there, then they can return if there is such an opportunity. Because there is a certain limit that can also be violated. We cannot grow up to 120 billion people who will simply devour all the resources like locusts and it will die and they will not be able to continue to pass the way here. This is a natural state when there is just a small castling. So consider it like this. Some formats can be really scary, but you shouldn't be afraid of it. In the universe, everything is arranged in harmony in any case. There is a certain balance. Yes, perhaps in some states it seems that it's not in the harmony, but you see so vividly it just in the moment. There will just be next cycle and next stage where it will be seem like there is so much light that there may be no any darkness left. But this is still a long way to go. It's too early now to talk about it. But still, let's take a person reincarnated here on Earth and still not awake, because almost few people woke up truly. Still, does this person have a choice or not? And how truly free it is? There are very young souls who are just learning. They are still only in the first grade. No one asks them if you want to go to university or not. You don't ask little kids whether they want to go to university and which one because they don't have the understanding yet, they don't have the experience yet, they haven't lived yet. It was just a batch of new souls, and they live out their stage as a new party. New year, new training has happened, and many souls have come. So they are trained in their own way and do not need to compare them with yourselves. They're in the first grade, you're in a high school, you do not compare yourselves with the little kids in terms of knowledge, and you don't say that they are stupid and you are so smart. It just would be so strange to compare some things that are not comparable. On the contrary, you need to treat it as condescending. You know why? Because you were in the first grade too. And for someone else, you were just as foolish and just as sleepy matter that hadn't yet become aware of what's going on. Therefore, there is not necessary to treat them as from the position of superiority, because there is no superiority. There are always ways of levels of. And does this philosophy correspond to the reality of the philosophy of castes in India? It turns out that there are lower castes or higher castes. Do you mean that? Well, not really. They have the moral oppression of these people and they have their superiority. I'm not telling you that. I'm talking about equality. It's just that your mentor doesn't come to you and doesn't not start towering over you and saying that you're a stupid matter that asks such stupid questions that could learn yourself. He doesn't bring you to the state of immature soul. He communicates with you as teacher, like an older brother. The older brother can certainly instruct, but he never forgets, never looks at you from the position of superiority. I mean, in normal families, because he understands that he used to be the same little kid asking the same questions. When you raise your level and you communicate with higher souls, they patiently and calmly explain some high matters that are difficult for you to understand. So you see everything that is happening around you, you should not turn them into some stupid mess. Yes, it may seem like this sometimes from the outside, but they also have a soul that is just very young and doesn't understand some things yet, and it also has its own way. But in the context of technological realities that we're having here on Earth, it looks like it makes easier to control and manipulate people for those who have power. Isn't that an obstacle to people's natural growth? Why do you think that in your time, several 100,000 years ago, okay, not hundreds of thousands, but thousands of years ago, why are you sure that the same instruments for manipulation haven't been used? They were just different. You mean it always existed all history, but someone was able to get over it and someone couldn't? Yes, and this is your light, which lights up like a light bulb. And when you understand that you are in this system, it's like waking up. When you look at the masses, you see that you do not respond to what they broadcast, because in the masses, it's easy to give in. It's easy to give in to general ideas because they do not want to stand you out. And if you do not respond to the general paradigms in which they live inside your soul, this is like turning on the light bulb above your head. You light up. You understand that the system is not yours. You're not comfortable in this system. But in order to realize this, you need to go through several stages of living in the system. And in order for you to finally understand, for you to go from birth to birth, well, I'm not talking specifically about you, but I'm talking in general about how it works. So when you leave your fourth life in the system over and over again, then you suddenly, your soul begins to tell you. It tells you, stop. I've already been there more than once. We've been through it all. It doesn't work that way. I don't want to do this anymore. I've lived through these stages. I lived this way and that way and this way, but it doesn't suit me. I want to choose a path that will no doubt my own ideas for 30 years. For sure, it's easy to fall into confusion just because a large volume of people is pressing on you, as you haven't seen a flock of fish that just wants to roar away and say, everyone, goodbye, now I'm living my own life. No, it still sticks to the common herd because this is the state of community as a single consciousness. It's hard to get out of this common unified consciousness as you understand the story with the Matrix. It's hard to just get out of it. When you come out of this, you get horrified that there is something wrong with the whole paradigm you were living in, and you start to get that actually it doesn't work very well. And so you begin the search. As soon as your search begins, the power of your soul starts to be gained. Soul doesn't want to be in the system anymore, and it wants to expand the boundaries of the system and understand in general how it works and why she even appeared in the system. So your soul begins, roughly speaking, to ask questions that are uncomfortable to herself and to you. And then people begin to ask questions and dig in deeper. They start to understand that some things contradict with each other. Thus, the general conditions in which the structure of your world can exist are simply created. I mean, that system works according to some certain canons. Therefore, two innovative ideas that can greatly transform people's minds will simply not be allowed to arise unexpectedly, because that will break down the system immediately. And you can imagine all 7 billion people will scatter like cockroaches in different directions, and there will be no tool to control them. Then there will be chaos that will probably lead to maybe apocalypses, because the system will collapse and people will start creating all sorts of weird things. So, in order to keep this whole structure both with low consciousness people and high one, so that they more or less could exist and develop, some general rules are needed just for this thing to work, because the rules are needed for something to function more or less. Your goal is to get out of this system. You can be in it because it's a common thing, but you can create and shape your own way to stay in it. Outwardly be in the system, but internally understand that the system exists and you're in it. And you are free to choose whether you want to ride in it as on a roller coaster or you want to build your own carousel and ride on it. No one can stop you from it, because the world is for everyone, and everyone decides for themselves what kind of reality to form and to live it. So you're talking about the fact that on the one side there will be chaos with 7 billion people running like cockroaches, but on the other side, digital total control over everyone and a system that opposes the fact that people can get out of it, even those who are ready, like people in Europe who cannot get out of their homes. What prevents you from waking up? Every person inside himself is a big universe. He just believes that the universe is around him. He believes that everything is so interesting around and directs attention there. He absorbs information that is not particularly necessary. He greedily absorbs those material goods that are provided to him. They distract him. In fact, it's all distracting. You basically have to look inside yourself, because there is so much space and it's so rich that you don't really need these external things. And you can go out for a walk. This doesn't mean that you are put at home and simply locked up during quarantine. People are free, even in the format of the strict discipline, which is now present. Yes, I agree with you that this is reminiscent of the Cold War, but it also tends to end. Do you know what happens after the war with the development of mankind after that? Someone really get rich, but very few? No, I mean in general, some kind of growth and renewal. This is the purification, like filtering the unnecessary. In any case, the growth should come. The update is like a reset. In order not to bring cataclysms and catastrophes, for the planet not to get hurt and suffer, because that planet is alive and everything living like organs. Imagine to be able humankind to understand you need your kidneys to get sick, or your lungs stop breathing, or maybe diuretic system in the form of rivers to overflow. The earth will do what she's being told, but she also doesn't want to injure herself if it's not necessary. Therefore, in order to prevent this from happening, such conditions and such context have to be created now. And how do you see it from the soul world perspective? What is happening here on Earth when humanity does not really appreciate the planet, taking lots of resources, increasing its population and consumption? Do we really destroy the planet, or it is temporary? And what will happen to her if we continue developing like that? You have to understand that humanity lasts long enough on a given civilization. Imagine like you're given some clothes. You walk with them, you wear, you wear, you wear, and then it gets worn out with time. Yes, you can clean it, or you can paint it, or you can still patch it up, but somehow it will become worn out anyway, because you can't really help it anyway. You can restore your clothes, but it also requires resources. Continuing this example, someone was given a jacket and he wears it inaccurate. He throws it everywhere, gets in the rain, and certainly for this person, this clothes will certainly wear out more fast. But if you treat it carefully with the understanding that it is given to you in general for the rest of your life, or even not at one life, therefore, this is the awareness and consciousness people should reach, that it is not a one time planet. You mean that we will live here many more lives? Yes, that they still need to stay in it. It has its own cycle. Yes, the Earth has its own cycle, the cycle of civilization, and it is quite large. And it still all depends on the civilization itself. Imagine if someone presses the nuclear button now, so the conversation will be over. Therefore, there is a cycle of development of civilization, but everything depends on the person and humanity. How can he really at this stage be present here on Earth as a civilization? Because it is also not eternal in terms of one time frame. Yes, Earth regenerates itself, but even then, it's like a living planet. But you can see what happens to the planets. They can crumble or be destroyed. Therefore, everyone has their own long journey, but we're talking about quite large periods of time, which is now difficult to explain. But tell me from your perspective, do we as humanity still have time to realize what you're talking about? So we won't be able to destroy the planet and make it unsuitable for living? Well, you ask such global questions with some such definition of future. Yes, but do we still have time to realize before it's too late, before we destroy the planet or make it the world too ugly? Of course there is. This is the light that is given to the people of light to spread it, and it affects the minds of the dark ones much more brightly. That is why the knowledge is given, and the power and the resources for this. And how you will use these resources, how the light will understand how to work with it, and will not miss the chance to help others. Not everyone can be helped, but there is no such goal to help everyone. You do not give your knowledge to the small kids from junior school to help them with their lessons because they just won't understand it. You don't give him a notebook with logarithms and ask to solve that because he won't understand what to do. But you can give him a tip in his life realities how to cope with something at some levels. Okay, I got it. And let me ask you another question then. So, in between incarnations, you understood that you should come on Earth with tasks about technologies and innovations, like a historical figure that may change civilization. So, how is the decision made in the world of souls what environment you will be put in, what parents and neighborhood and country you will come? You, as a soul, participate in particular decision making? This is a large set of factors about successes earlier. I can tell you straight, all the so called statistics of incarnations on Earth are taken and read, where there was an omission, where a person didn't cope, for example, went into obscuration, or was given such a situation where, for example, he treated his parents badly, was angry with them, or devaluated them. It's individual for everyone. All aspects of previous life are taken and based on this data, new programs are complied. This is the date where all aspects are read. You're given a new program, a new firmware according to which you must come. You can get also the previous task, just depending on growth of your soul and how you coped with it in your previous lives. And you could give the task higher or harder, but there are always different aspects and it's very individual. How did it happen that you come up to biological parents who gave up you at a very early age? Was it a part of a program too? Yeah, I needed to go through it. Genius people need somehow to develop. They essentially like lone wolves. Sometimes special conditions are being created for the man of such kind, so he could grow up and bring to people what he's about to bring. So I wasn't particularly distracted by anything. I even had a family. I tried to play this role myself as it used to be in many other families. I also wanted to tell you about the condition you asked about that people have. I'm talking about raising to the level of their education to provide them with a comfortable standard of living. Due to the fact that many are on the verge of poverty, there is still no awareness and clear understanding that they can somehow harm or pollute the planet because they are not educated. The rise of their education level and the rise of level of their living, when their basic needs are satisfied, they will begin to devote time to education and less time to the field work. Educating people is not making them obey, but teaching them basic things like brushing their teeth or cleaning after themselves. And it must come in their mind as a basic thing from childhood. And more programs that they will have as their basic thinking, the less money and attention they will spend on their consumption. And that will help bring the balance to the system. Because educated people care and not educated do not care because they're not taught to think. They are used to live like animals based on their instincts because the animal doesn't ask where to go to the toilet, it just does. But when there are norms or rules that you have from childhood that are formed from your childhood, people do it without even thinking about it or unconsciously. The more programs of that kind people will have, the better humanity will live. And people could start living like intelligent beings. Yeah, but tell me then, in the continuation of this topic, if there's an animal that goes to the toilet wherever it wants, but its harm to the planet is limited, and there are many educated people from the first world countries who fly at minimum 10 times a year on airplane and consume a lot of plastic, their harm is much bigger, right? That is what sustainable consumption I'm talking about. Now, in any case, there is a movement in this direction, a change in the paradigm of consumption. The more vividly it is being broadcasted, the more vividly it will be. In fact, the virus and the whole pandemic thing, sitting at home, showed people, well, many to this came to this through sitting at home, that actually they don't need many things. They don't need so much. But this is what makes most of the consumption. It's like children who are finally given the opportunity to buy all the toys in the store. And when the child has already played enough and bought all the toys, then he will already come to the realization that actually he already has so many toys and nothing new pleases him anymore. And then he starts to think about what really makes him happy. And this is where a transformative system of questions begins that changes the attitude when that question is raised. The question is, what makes me happy? Many people have already reached the level of income and they no longer understand what brings them happiness, but they understand that material super benefits no longer please them, or that kind of pleasure is only short term, and to gain pleasure again you have to consume something again. It's like a homeless animal that eats everything but still feels hungry. We do not take into consideration countries that haven't reached this yet, but in many countries there's already a moment when many have already eaten enough, but it didn't bring happiness, and they decided to think about what makes them really happy. And this is where the path of questions to itself and to the world begins. You went to India at young age. They say even for 7 months, and I've heard that it have been an important trip in terms of your awareness. Can you tell us what was transformational in that trip for you? Yes. I just structured myself. Because when I suddenly started to receive these flashes, I was immersed in these states and lived inside these unknown states. And I also use some psychedelics for my psychological experiments. And of course, when you're inexperienced and do not understand what is happening to you, well, it was like flashes, some super uncontrolled states of flow. But they were of a short term nature. I can't say they scared me, but they surprised me. You can say that I was confused by the states. So I began to dig in this direction and began to understand, and I was helped with this in India. I mean, I was given a big task, and if it took me so long to get what to do with it, I wouldn't have enough time to do the things that I have to do. That is why I was helped to some extent and guided. But even where I was, I actually discovered everything as in general about how everything in the universe works. For sure, not in such details as I know now, just it was just to calm down my restless mind to give me some confidence and understanding to the states that I lived through because they were so bright. That is why I needed teachers who could structure me and explain how to deal with it. I needed instructions for myself.
After receiving this kind of instruction, did you realize about your mission and incarnation? Did you get it over there in India or you didn't get it at all?
To some extent, I was given instructions, some vector, explained how everything works in general. Yes, I didn't understand that there are some high tasks and high souls that can give some ideas. In general, they explained to me the paradigm in which I was comfortable and which to some extent calmed me down and gave me some foothold because to some extent I was a little bit, you know, there were states when it seemed to me that I was completely different, that I might have some distortions or schizophrenia, or so I needed not to fall into the spit. But I was given the foundation at the initial stage to build a paradigm in which I was more comfortable.
Okay, got it. And how often did you use psychedelics?
I actually lived in such a world. I needed to understand some things for myself and I did experiments on my mind. Because these flashes gave me such strange sensations that I had to look for some tools to explain them to myself. Explaining to myself by living through some bright things. At this time, I wouldn't say it was quite popular, but it was a novelty, and I decided that this is one of the ways. Moreover, I lived in my own world where I visualized and created ideas visually, creating some kind of picture in my head. And I lived these things that you say now as a designer. And so this tool was suitable in some aspects, and I experimented. It really helped a lot at that moment.
Oh, that's clear now. And did you use it when you were a grown up?
Not really. I can't imagine it, because it's probably what made me mad.
Oh, yeah, I see. At some certain moment, you were kicked out of Apple. Was it according to the program, or what was that?
It was more of a human factor, because try to understand of what the whole format of my behavior consisted of. Not too many people could stand me, and it was hard to interact with me on the level of human relations. So I was like a genius or a geezer with more aggressive note. I'm a scientist if you want.
And what happened after? You almost left the valley, but at some point everything started to get better. Is that any force stopped you, or what?
Well, it was not in my program to fail. Not a program and not in my head. But due to the fact that I decided to include my inner knowledge without receiving it from above, I started to create the ideas out of my head, thinking that it would bring some benefit and glory to me, that they would bring me back. But imagine the moral decline I was in. I had to prove to myself and to the world that I was worthy, not only within the framework of a single product, but that I was a product, that I can create any product without being in some corporation, that I can create such unique things by myself that it only happens because of me. I didn't realize that it was not only my ideas, but the hands that made it, that some things I couldn't do myself. I told you I used them as a tool, as leverage. I was just pulling the right levers. I thought it was all my own creations, but I really paid for it often. You know what I mean. I was just corrected. The universe made it clear for me that yes, I really transform, but this is not 100% my merit. But at the same time, at some point, you turned out to be near Pixar, and it affected the animation film industry. But that was not tech. Just some ideas were translated through cartoons. I'm telling you that through the education of children, you can lay the right attitude in them. If you look at the cartoons that were created in my period, you could notice that there was enough moral things were broadcasted. Oh yeah, sure. Were you the one who insisted that in Toy Story Woody, the main character, was good and not bad as it was planned before? Because you knew that the kids would love him? Children always need to see a good example. It is important where your child look. It is very important to realize that the example they follow shapes their inner world. If you take them to museums, explain some higher issues, or take them to concerts of beautiful music that is harmoniously composed, or expand their horizons through even small traveling, or broadcast to them the right things about the nature of animals, about science, about his inner world. Let it be to some extent psychology or about the structure of the universe. That will expand the scope of perception of the world they have, and they will begin to understand that there are many things around us and that they are not alone on Earth. And all their interests in this world can correctly be formed through this prism. You just create him a prism through which he looks and he imitates. Children imitate and they repeat and they need a good role model because they want to repeat. If they look at the stupidity and degradation or some kind of decline and the responsible attitude, then they will transform these attitudes through themselves because they don't know the other way. It is logical. That is why you can see that during my time, what ideas were broadcasted, and you will understand that the ideas were always with a good intention. At least we did our best. Okay, let's talk about Disney. Uh, Someday, Pixar has been sold to Disney, and you became the biggest private stockholder. Do you know what Disney secretly put in his cartoons? To tell you the truth, I didn't go deep into the state because I lived a different prism of my world. Somewhere at the back of my mind, I just felt something wrong, but I couldn't explain it to myself because I was, to be honest, quite busy about different things. You cannot be defocused when you have such big goals. You can't keep track of everything around you, especially that I had to make sure that in tech world some things that may harm people wouldn't come out of me. And tell me please, can you see from the world of souls now how the Disney paid for these things. There is a certain place. It is empty and it broadcasts to you all the harmful things you've done and all the damage you've caused. This is a kind of this is a state of darkness. This is where the soul begins to live through that. She has no light there. She just sees what she's done. And the soul is light in its essence. She comes from the creator that laid the divine in it. And then she's no longer in the framework of individuality, start to observe which side she was on. No one wants to see when, or rather, no one wants to experience when you're poked in a puddle that you're made. This is unpleasant for anyone. Of course, I'm telling you in an exaggerated way because I can't explain to you within the framework of your perception. But until she has lived through all these states, this is not a punishment. In the sense that the soul is not sucked of any energy or no one affects it. They just broadcast all the feelings to him and he leaves everything as if through himself. Therefore, it's quite educational in nature.
Finishing with the topic of children, they say that you gave very limited access to the gadgets to your children. Is that true?
It's just that I was so much in my own world and I was kind of watching what is happening from the outside. I was so sorry that I was such a bad father. Well, not exactly bad, but that my children are my products, and I love them much more and treated them well. Not that I love them much more, it's hard to say. I just wanted to pay more attention to them, and I didn't want my children to live in the same paradigm, so that they can see more of the live world, absorb more of some living things. It's so fatherly for some good intention.
Okay. And after these, all companies like Pixar and Next, what helped you to return to Apple? Was there some force that brought you back, or
Yes, I just dissolved to some extent my personality and followed the path that I needed to find. And you might have noticed that I changed a little bit.
yes, of course. Thank you for the reply. The question about the quantum computer. On what intent and purpose it is being created for?
Transportation.
Sorry, transportation of what? Can you share some more detail?
This is when matter can be moved.
On what purpose?
I'm not allowed to tell you this.
But is it light or dark intention? Or we do not have access to such information.
Yes, this issue is not for discussion at the moment.
Okay, got it. And can I ask a question about Hadron Collider? It is also a technological big thing. What is happening there? How does it affect the Earth and people?
Firstly, it affects the structure of it on her energy field through the creation of some kind of holes. You know, when you have holes in your aura, in certain phantoms, there can penetrate something. So here goes as a thinning of some kind of energy fields. Let's call it Earth's aura for you easier to understand. There is thinning like holes. Through these holes, dark ones can get in. But Collider itself is the big hole. It just clones itself. Who? The Collider or Earth? Collider is the machine she creates like itself. This is a hole itself, and it is just cloning itself, but only not big ones. And yes, it takes time, but in any case, it functions in this format. But where do the light forces and keepers of the Earth look? Does it harm the Earth and interfere with its path? That is why the light is given a knowledge. At the same time, they seem not to apply that much. That means still not ready to apply yet, not grown up for it yet. But will they have time to grow before the Earth will be a giant single hole? It depends on people.
Question to the audience. What do you know about Hadron Collider? Please let us know if you would you like to know more about it? Tell us what do you think of it or share any interesting materials or videos in the comments.
And the technology leaders that we know today from the biggest expensive companies, who is standing behind them? What power, light or dark? So far, it's more dark, but that is only for now. And do they realize it? I mean, not their souls exactly, but their physical part. Yes, they enter these lodges where they are explained everything. It's like I went to India and I was explained the same thing they get explained there. But are they explained what aftermath they get for it and how they will pay? Is it explained to them as well? I don't think so. No, just kidding. I think that most likely they are given a perspective, but it is so sweet in the moment of possession that there is something that you think you do not fully realize what you are going to do. So you understand that there is some kind of aftermath, but you do not quite get in the form of what, and anyway, it will be sometime later. And in general, this is an abstract story. These people live in a material world and feel very good now. The power. Well, the power is a very interesting structure. It is like that if the money makes you drunk, makes you feel some kind of euphoria or permissiveness, then the power is the same but multiple by two. It so obscures the eyes in general. This is like a veil that you are looking through this haze and not thinking at all. Well, it's like a strong drug affects you, but even stronger. And imagine power multiplied by money. Imagine what is in their mind. So when they're told to be aware that there's likely to be some sort of payback, they generally ignore it. Because human is blind in general, blind, deaf, and there's so much in this state. How can I explain to you so that it could be more clear? Well, he's like in his ball, in his vacuum. This state is generally euphoric and illusory, that he passes by there, you're like in your ball, you're like rolling and everything around you, you're having a good time in the ball right now, and even if people around you are suffering, you see you have your own microverse and they have theirs, and it doesn't seem to concern you much. And so they have a detachment from real life in general. They are like detached. It's like a parallel world. Therefore, they cannot descend from the point of view, as it were, and see the world through the eyes of ordinary people. In general, it is difficult for them to do this because they are so elevated by the state that they can neither morally nor physically descend at all. Even if they come down, they won't see much. They're in their own world like a ball, they look through it. I got it. Have you been hooked by this thing like power multiplied by money yourself? No, I'm telling you, it's not that hooked me. I told you that I was hooked by a different idea. I was a little far away from those material things. It was not the power that exalted me. I saw it like a book. If you look at the book and flip through millennia or centuries, and you realize that you have flipped through it yourself, you feel yourself at the level of some kind of God, and this state of God not being it really dangerous. Because there's a serious aftermath, and I faced it, believe me. Please tell me, how much dark energy did you gain during your incarnation? There was enough. I don't want to remember that because I went through this stage that I told you about. Most likely, I think it was for these thoughts that I told you. Yeah, I was just able to tour this one. I saw, I didn't know how the universe works to some extent, but here everything was shown to me. And I realized all my own, well, not exactly insignificancy, but first of all, I realized my personality format, how narrow it is, and that there's a lot of more things in the universe than myself, and how everything really works. And I was glad because I'm part of it all. I'm not outside of the system of a large structure. I'm a big part of it that forms the development, and I was to some extent both happy and brought up in the right way. So I do not flatter illusions, but I also do not devalue myself as a particle. Of course, I got it. And in 2003, pancreatic cancer was revealed in you, and they say that during first 9 months you refused any idea of a surgery or any medical treatment. Instead, you started to follow a strict diet, you became fructarian, and you used acupuncture, even you went to a fortune teller. It was a period of denial. I thought that I could cope on my own using such things. You know, that anger, it was like a cluster in my body because I was so hot tempered. And if it didn't flash in me, it collected inside. I mean, it kept in myself, in my system, and it reflected on me, everything not splashed out. And that is why I kind of hurt other people that were around me. Has this approach shortened your life or not? Because they say it shortened, and if you had had the surgery earlier, you could have lived longer. Everything was as it should have been. There are no subjective moods, no ambitions, and it's already happened. It's just that in any case, no matter how treatment comes to you, in any case, you form your space, you form your diagnosis, and you form your reality and you make your decision. So there is no point blaming someone for some actions. But it was my decision, so I take responsibility for everything and I say that it was my life and I have no complaints about it. That is why there are no subjectives to discuss how it have been the other way. Yeah, I got it. But it turned out to be a rare form of cancer and it lends itself to surgery. It was the second chance giving to you, or why did it work out? It was like I was still not an ordinary guy, and sometimes I was given some divine things anyway. And I could choose to use them and take advantage of this. They say that organ transplantation equates in the world of souls to something very bad. Yeah, that there is some kind of cannibalism, or is that all rumors? I don't know really. I can't tell you this. In your Stanford speech for the graduates, you said that death is very likely the single best invention of life. It life's change agent. It clears out the old to make the way for something new. I just explained in a veiled way what should happen to people. You should realize that your soul goes from one body to another and grows in it, and it's not static. And to some extent, you can be happy about death because you are being transitioned to a different class. You don't want to sit in the same grade, right? That doesn't leave you for one more year, especially when the body gets old physically. There's less energy for creation in it. That is why when you feel that there is less energy, as if you're decrepit, you want to leave the state of a new body, and it's cool. Further, your words were at the time is limited and it's not worth losing it to live someone else's life. Yes, because you're given tasks and resources that they end as you're being conditioned by body frames. And as I gave example to you, it gets worn out, I mean the body. And you better use this chance instead of sitting in your phones. One of the most popular quotes you gave, stay hungry, stay foolish. Is it the message as well? This is the state when you're hungry, when you're missing something, and you're always in more incentive to do something. And so sometimes it's advantageous to put yourself in an artificial state of limitation in something. To some extent, it is to do austerities when they consciously immerse themselves in a state of absence of something. And when they return, they leave with such power and such a new vision. That is, they erase the usual state of permissiveness, and it's very unpleasant in the moment. And even the world gives you difficult situations of losing something, but they give you in another way. They immerse you in a state of some hard drama, but when you return, you decide not to think about it, but to be hungry to the world that you have lost. But you can gain even more from it. And it gives you an influx of energy. It's even to some degree a reboot. Because in a normal state, when the person is with, does he want to go hunting for something? Think of it. It concerns many aspects of life. Are you planning to have another incarnation on Earth? Well, probably yes. And I think the final question. Sometimes life hits you with a brick. Don't lose faith. That were your last words. That is, I just told you about. When you think the world is taking revenge on you, or it's aggressive and immerses you in such states, it seems to you that the world doesn't love you, that you're an outcast of this world, that it doesn't favor you. And sometimes to some people it is true, because they stay in this prism for a long time. And when you stay in this prism for a long time, that prism becomes your reality, you know? And when you get out of consciously, like Münchhausen, you know, the cartoon hero, pulling himself by the head, dragging from the swamp, you directly pull out and you understand, wow, it was on purpose. Because looking back, you realize that life gave you such a boost and incentive to grow that if the situation wasn't there, you wouldn't have reached any heights.
Okay, this is it for now. Thank you so much for your answers. Thank you for those of you who have stayed with us till the end of this interview. This is one of our first videos and we have just started, but there's much more to come. Please let us know in the comments what do you think about our interviews. Please be honest. We will appreciate any feedback, like or dislike. Feel free to write in your comments with whom you would like to hear another interview and what questions are you particularly interested in.